Hi guys, my name is Brandon and today we'll delve into the case of a girl who disappeared on her way home from school. The police and thousands of volunteers went on a search, but they couldn't find any traces of her. This went on for several days until an extremely unexpected twist brought closure to this case, making it one of the most shocking stories in the country. Midsi Sanchez was born on August 10, 1992, in Vallejo, California. She grew up in a large, close-knit family with two brothers and a sister. Midsi was a cheerful and bright child. She enjoyed spending time outdoors with her friends and playing with her siblings. From a young age, Midsi was quite independent. When she started elementary school, her parents allowed her to walk there with her brother without any adult supervision. The school was located just a short distance from their home, with most of the route lying along a busy road. August 10, 2000, was Midsi's 8th birthday. She was excited about the celebration party her family had been preparing for her. Midsi asked her mom if she could skip school for the occasion, but the woman said no. Midsi was upset about it, and around 7:30 a.m., she left her home with her brother. After her classes, Midsi was supposed to wait for her brother so they could walk home together. But when her brother went outside the school, he couldn't find his sister anywhere. Thinking she had already left without him, he headed home alone. But it turned out that Midsi wasn't there. Their older sister, who was home at that time, immediately became worried. Since Midsi was eagerly anticipating her birthday party, her absence seemed odd. She waited for some time, hoping that Midsi would eventually show up, and around 4 p.m., the sister decided to call their mom and tell her about it. Their mom immediately called Midsi's school and learned that her daughter had attended all her classes. The mother then reached out to family members and Midsi's friends, but no one had seen her after school. Midsi's relatives became worried and started searching for her. Many people, from family friends to neighbors, also joined in. Together, they quickly organized a massive search. While some of them walked the streets, others knocked on every door along the route, from the house to school, asking if anyone had seen her. They even started printing and distributing flyers with information about Midsi. Despite all their efforts, they couldn't find her, so Midsi's parents decided to call 911. The police immediately joined the search, and local media started covering the case on the same day. Midsi's disappearance instantly captured the public's attention, since similar incidents had already occurred in their town before. For several years, an unknown perpetrator or multiple perpetrators had been kidnapping kids in Vallejo. The most recent case had occurred in December '99. Less than a year before Midsi's disappearance. 7-year-old Ziana Fairchild, who lived just a few miles from Midsi's house, disappeared on her way to school. Despite all the efforts by the police and the FBI, she was never found. Now, when Midsi vanished on her way home from school, investigators feared the same perpetrator might be involved. Despite the lack of leads at that point, the striking similarities between those cases were already obvious. However, Ziana's case remained unsolved, leaving detectives with little to go on. They began re-examining everyone previously considered a suspect in her case, but it yielded no results. The next day, Midsi's disappearance made headlines not only in the local news, but statewide. Everyone feared a serial kidnapper was at large and dreaded the possibility of him getting away with it once again. Midsi's relatives gave multiple interviews, trying to draw more attention to the case. Her mom also pleaded with the possible abductor to return her daughter safely. The police received numerous tips, but none of them proved useful. However, everything changed 24 hours after Midsi's disappearance when something unexpected happened. A man contacted the police, informing them that he discovered bloodied rags at a landfill. Upon examination, experts determined that the rags were actually bedsheets from a Vallejo hotel. Although they sent the evidence to the lab, blood analysis would take days. Investigators also visited the hotel, but were unable to confirm whether Midsi had been there. With nothing but waiting for lab results, investigators combed the landfill, searching for any other clues, but it yielded nothing. The following day, August 12th, the police received another call and it changed the course of this case immediately. At around 11 a.m., a man reported driving through an industrial area in Santa Clara when a little girl ran up to his van, screaming that someone was chasing her. She climbed into the van's cabin and the driver saw a man running in their direction. The girl yelled that he had kidnapped her and wanted to kill her. As soon as she was in the van, the perpetrator turned around, got into his car and fled. Meanwhile, the girl told the driver her name was Midsi Sanchez and he contacted the police. Officers immediately picked her up and drove her to a hospital for examination. They also called her mother and let her speak to her daughter. Soon after, her relatives rushed to the hospital and reunited with Midsi. Meanwhile, detectives spoke with the van driver. The man proved a crucial lead. He remembered the license plate of the kidnapper's vehicle because it drove off right in front of his van. It turned out the van driver was on that road almost by chance. He had a day off, but was asked by his supervisor to cover a shift and deliver a load. If he hadn't been there, the perpetrator possibly could have caught up with the girl. The police ran the license plate and identified the car belonging to a 39-year-old man named Curtis Dean Anderson. He had been on law enforcement's radar before, with prior convictions for thefts, kidnapping, and suspicion of other crimes. As investigators focused all efforts on finding the abductor, their colleagues prepared to hear Midsi's account of what had happened to her. She told them that on August 10th, she was eagerly awaiting the end of school to go home and celebrate her birthday with her family. When her final class ended, Midsi decided not to wait for her brother and headed home alone. Just a few hundred yards away, she noticed a parked car by the roadside. Inside was a man, watching her intently through the rearview mirror. Midsi felt uneasy about him, but quickly brushed it off. It was daytime, she was on a familiar street, and being young, she didn't fully grasp the potential danger posed by strangers. As Midsi approached the car, the man got out and asked her to help him. He said he needed to grab a roll of tape from under the car seat. He also explained that he couldn't bend down himself due to a leg injury from falling off his bike. Despite her uneasy feeling, Midsi agreed to help. At that time, she couldn't fully comprehend the potential danger posed by the adult man, and her parents had always taught her to help others. As soon as Midsi reached for the tape, the perpetrator shoved her inside, covered her mouth with his hand, and slammed the door shut. Midsi tried to scream, but it was too late. The kidnapper drove off in an unknown direction, leaving her to gaze out the window in horror. At one point, they passed Midsi's home, and she saw her relatives preparing to celebrate her birthday. A few minutes later, the kidnapper pulled into a deserted parking lot. He gave Midsi new clothes, forced her to change, and discarded her old clothing in a nearby trash bin. He also warned Midsi not to try to escape, claiming he had a gun and that no one ever managed to get away from him. In the next few hours, he drove Midsi in an unknown direction. At one point, she asked why he had kidnapped her, and the man simply replied that the same had happened to him when he was a child. When it got dark, he parked again and began covering the car windows with some rags. He then pulled out a chain and secured it to Midsi's leg with a padlock. Then, the perpetrator took out a bottle of alcohol and forced her to take a few sips. Midsi tried to argue with him, but eventually complied with his demand. After that, the man grabbed a camera and took several pictures of Midsi, then laid down to sleep right in the car. Midsi tried to keep her eyes open, afraid of falling asleep. She was thinking how to escape, and at one point saw a police car drive past the parking lot, but it was far away, and even if Midsi had screamed, the officers would never have been able to hear her. The next day, the perpetrator continued driving her around the city. He made her sit on the floor of the car and covered her with sheets to hide her from view. At one point, he stopped and got out for a few minutes. Midsi tried to free her leg from the chain but quickly realized it was impossible. She also found a nail file and attempted to unlock the padlock, but it didn't work. When the perpetrator returned to the car and drove away, he claimed he had stopped by her parents' house. The kidnapper pretended to be a concerned citizen and asked for flyers to distribute around town. Midsi was shocked and overwhelmed. She had been so close to home, yet still remained in captivity. Throughout the next few hours, the perpetrator stopped several times, getting in and out of the car. In the evening, he drove out of town and parked in a deserted area where he sexually assaulted his victim. After that, the man fell asleep, leaving Midsi in a state of shock. The next morning, he drove off again, making several stops along the way, mainly to buy cigarettes and alcohol. At one point, when he returned to the car and leaned into the cabin, something fell out of his pocket. He told Midsi not to look there and left again. But the girl didn't listen to him. She glanced down and saw a large bunch of keys. Midsi quickly realized that one of them must unlock the padlock on her chain. She was afraid of what the perpetrator might do to her if she disobeyed, but eventually Midsi overcame this fear. She grabbed the bunch, picked a key that seemed to fit the lock the best, and attempted to unlock it. To her surprise, it worked. Midsi freed herself from the chain. Now, only the car door stood between her and freedom. Midsi opened the window and tried to climb out through it, but she encountered another problem. She was so exhausted that she could barely move her legs. Gathering all her strength, she managed to lift herself and leap out of the car. As she crawled around it, she spotted her kidnapper, who immediately noticed her. The man began shouting for her to come back, but Midsi had no intention of giving up. With her last ounce of energy, she ran in the opposite direction. The perpetrator chased after her while Midsi tried to flag down passing cars for help. She waved and screamed, but they all drove past. Despite this, Midsi kept moving toward her freedom. She had no doubt that if she stopped for even a second, the perpetrator would catch up and harm her. Everything happened very quickly, but for Midsi, this moment stretched on forever. Eventually, she spotted a van, ran towards it, and jumped right in front of it. The driver quickly stopped and Midsi climbed into the cabin. She was shocked, dehydrated, and hungry, but her life was no longer in danger. At the hospital, doctors provided her with the necessary assistance, and soon, her entire family arrived to reunite with her. Midsi's miraculous rescue instantly became the main news story in the city. When she was brought home, thousands of people gathered on her street. They applauded her and shouted birthday greetings, which she had missed. Meanwhile, the police were hunting down the kidnapper, whose whereabouts remained unknown. When they showed his photo to Midsi's mother, she realized she had actually seen him twice. The first time was before her daughter's abduction, when he stood on their street and looked towards their house. The second time was the day after Midsi's disappearance, when the perpetrator came to her home and asked for flyers. The search for Curtis continued until late evening. Police set up surveillance at all known places he frequented, and eventually it paid off. He came to a trailer park and was apprehended without resistance. Curtis was booked in jail awaiting trial, and detectives began investigating his possible connections to other crimes. The man himself told Midsi she wasn't his first victim and no one had managed to escape him. Investigators simply couldn't imagine this being his first crime of its kind. All his careful and likely premeditated actions suggested he had significant experience in committing such atrocities. It's worth mentioning that Curtis had been previously imprisoned for kidnapping a woman in 1991. He was released in November 1999, and now the police were confident that after his release, he had killed at least one girl, 7-year-old Ziana Fairchild, but we'll get back to that shortly. There was also no doubt that he intended to kill Midsi. Moreover, one specific fact directly indicated that it was supposed to happen on the day of her escape. Police learned why Curtis had stopped in the industrial area. He used to work there at one of the companies, and that day he visited his former colleagues. He had asked them for a large bag, and detectives immediately realized he planned to dispose of a body in it. After Curtis's arrest, Midsi struggled to recover for a long time. However, she soon learned that the police were suspecting him of kidnapping Ziana, which made her even more uneasy. While Midsi was glad she managed to escape, she also worried about the fate of this 7-year-old girl. More than 8 months have passed since her disappearance, and there was no news about Ziana's fate. Midsi wanted to help find her, so just days after her own rescue, she participated in a search operation along with other volunteers. Unfortunately, they couldn't find any new leads on Ziana's possible whereabouts. This continued until January 2001, when a human skull was found in the mountains near the city of Santa Cruz. Forensic analysis showed it belonged to Ziana, and she was officially declared dead. Midsi took this news very hard, but ahead of her was another challenge, the trial. It began in April of the same year. Midsi had to testify before the full courtroom and recount in every detail what Curtis had done to her. He was also present there, but despite all of this, Midsi managed to fulfill her task. In the end, Curtis was sentenced to 251 years in prison, but that wasn't the end of his story. Detectives repeatedly visited him in jail and asked him questions about his possible involvement in other crimes. At one point, they learned that Curtis had confessed to a fellow inmate about kidnapping and killing 8 other girls. The inmate agreed to cooperate with the police and repeated Curtis' words in detail. But Curtis himself wasn't ready to reveal all his secrets. He didn't deny anything, but tried to negotiate various privileges for himself, speaking with detectives in riddles. Eventually, the man hinted that he had indeed murdered Ziana Fairchild and that he had killed at least 13 other girls and women. It wasn't until 2005 that he gave full confession in Ziana's murder, and for that, he received an additional 50-year sentence. As for Midsi, her challenges didn't end with Curtis' trial. Just a few weeks after her rescue, she returned to school where she faced bullying from other children. They called her the kidnapped girl, said she should have died instead of being saved, and generally behaved extremely inappropriately. As a result, her school years became a heavy burden for her, and along with the tragedy she had experienced, it didn't help in her recovery process. Midsi also repeatedly joined the searches for other missing children, but more often than not, it ended with the discovery of their bodies. Each time, she felt this tragedy as if it were her own, and ultimately, she couldn't cope with this pressure anymore. Alcohol became her only way to cope with the stress, and with each passing day, Midsi turned to it more and more frequently. Eventually, she stopped seeing even the slightest chance of returning to a normal life. But one day, everything changed. Midsi was involved in a serious car accident after a party with friends. She broke her neck, arm, and spent 2 weeks in a coma. When she woke up, doctors informed her that she is pregnant and would have a daughter. This news turned her life upside down, and Midsi found the strength to change it for the better once again. She decided to dedicate all her time not only to her daughter, but also to other children who became victims of various crimes. She founded a non-profit organization that continues to provide assistance to those in need to this day. As for Curtis, he died of illness in 2007, just 6 years after being sentenced. The only reason the detectives regretted it was the fact that they had not managed to obtain full confessions from him regarding other cases he was suspected of. Although they still haven't been solved, the police continue to consider his involvement highly probable. It is worth mentioning that Curtis had a son who followed in his father's footsteps. He was convicted of murder, and in 2019, his own life ended in prison. Alright guys, share your thoughts on this story in the comments section, and don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe. Thank you for watching.